Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Anti-Racism Terminology. This video is brought to you by the Rainbow Diversity Institute, a company that does education on equity, diversity, and inclusion topics like this and many others. You can learn more about us at rainbowdiversityinstitute.ca. Today's video is going to provide an introduction to the concept of race and racialization. So when we talk about race, we're referring to the categories that we use to differentiate people. So scientists and anthropologists have shown time and again that race is socially constructed, i.e. that it's not based in reality or in science, and that our racial categories are determined by a social process called racialization. Now, racialization occurs differently in different cultures. So that means that our understanding of race in Western culture is distinct from racial constructs elsewhere. So, for example, in Brazil, people are assigned to racial groups based on what they look like, their social status, and other qualities regardless of their ancestry. So this means that two people who are full biological relatives, for example, siblings, might actually belong to two distinct races. In North American culture, we tend to use what's referred to as the one-drop rule, which is a notion of race that dates back to the Jim Crow era. This was the time in the United States after enslaved people were freed, but while laws actively enforced racial segregation and racial violence and hierarchy. And so this kind of one-drop rule was created in order to preserve what was thought to be the sanctity of whiteness, right? So we live in a white supremacist culture where whiteness is thought to be superior to other races and needs to be preserved. And so what this means is that when someone is mixed race, regardless of how significant whiteness is to their ancestry or DNA, and this is especially true if someone is mixed Black and white, they're typically not categorized as white because of this one drop rule. The idea is that even one drop of not white makes you not white. So that's kind of the racial construct that we hold in North America. And then we can see through the scientific perspective and through the work of biological anthropologists that the way we've constructed race doesn't actually line up with biology. However, all of this is to say that while race is socially constructed, it has real consequences for our lives. And while we work towards relearning what we know about race and its construction, we also have an important obligation to address the realities of racism that we're faced with today. So I've talked a little bit about race or racial categories being developed through a process called racialization. So what is racialization? Racialization is the process by which certain characteristics, behaviors, and qualities, whether these are real or imagined, become associated with a particular racial group. So most often, it's undesirable characteristics that are assigned to a racialized group, creating a hierarchy of races, some that have more quote-unquote desirable characteristics than others, and therefore reinforcing racism. So you can see in this image here the process by which racialization leads to or reinforces racism and the cycle that kind of occurs around it. So we have a process of racialization by which different groups are marked by race, and certain qualities and attributes are assigned to people on the basis of race, which creates a hierarchy between races, which necessitates some kind of form of racism, right? Because anytime that we assume that there's superiority to some racial groups over others, this creates a system of oppression for those who are not considered in the superior or dominant group. So I hope this helps you to understand a little bit about what we mean when we talk about race and racialization. And when you hear the term racialized and you're thinking about what does it mean to be racialized, we're talking about people of color in that case. So when we talk about racialized groups, we're talking about the ways in which these characteristics get associated with particular groups. And though white is a race, and it's really important for us to talk about whiteness and white people don't experience the same process of racialization. So they're not ascribed qualities and characteristics based on their race, and we can recognize a variety of ways of being white. And so we don't carry these stereotypes or prejudices against whiteness that we see reinforced in our education, criminal justice systems, media, and in our interpersonal interactions. If you're looking for more information about how oppression occurs and to really help you understand this distinction between whiteness and racialization, it might be helpful to look at some of the other videos that examine systems of oppression. But for today, what I'll say is that when we talk about racialized people, we're talking about the people who are racialized as not white, who are ascribed qualities and characteristics on the basis of the racial group that they belong to. And more commonly, as I mentioned, we refer to people who are racialized as people of color, or we might use the term BIPOC to refer to folks who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So thank you so much for taking the time to learn a little bit more about race and racialization today. You can find more videos and education like this at rainbowdiversityinstitute.ca.